One, let's start. Okay, I'm Adam Pertman, hello. I had something called the Evan B. Donaldson Adoption Institute, which I like to describe as the most important organization you've never heard of. Actually, I'll describe the work real fast this way. Mom takes her son, gender's unimportant. Mom takes her son to his first football game, and afterwards says, "How did you like it? What did you think?" And the kid says, "I loved it. I loved when they threw the ball around and they jumped on top of each other and they ran all over the place. It was so cool." But, next slide, please. But why all that fuss about 25 cents? And the mom says, "What are you talking about?" And the kid says, "You know, at the beginning they threw a coin up in there, and the whole time after that it's get the quarterback, get the quarterback." It takes a minute. And the point is that if no one ever explains the rules to you, if you don't know who the players are, if you don't know how it works, you can't even understand what's happening in front of your very eyes. That's where we had been with adoption for generations. People didn't tell their own kids they were adopted. How were we supposed to understand it? How were we supposed to understand that our children are our own children, that we are real parents? How were we supposed to learn all that when we didn't even talk about it? And so today we talk about it. These are programs and projects of the institute that I had, which is adoptioninstitute.org. I urge you to take a look simply because we don't place children for adoption. We don't make money off adoption. It's a resource where you can find out a lot. And these are just some of the work we do. Please keep going on the slide. One of the things I do is write books. They're available here. That's my peddling for the day. Next. So I'm not going to go through these slides simply because we have a really short time frame. But what I want to offer you, if you write to info@adoptioninstitute.org, I will send them to you. And it's a nice little short course, if you'll take a look, where we were, where we've gotten to, how have things changed, and what does that mean to you. So it's not about child placement. It's not about your decision and how you decide to do it, whether through an agency, through an attorney. That's your decision. But it gives you a lay of the land to understand how this process has changed and what your life will be like. And that's very much what my book is about as well, Adoption Nation. Next. And so again, these are some of the changes. And I will point out just a couple. The second red bullet point, most adoptions in America, and this is a radical change over the course of the generations, most adoptions, so you know today, are not infants through agencies or attorneys. They are older children, almost the vast majority from foster care. That's where most adoptions in America are today. And that surprises most people. And I will point to the last bullet, that the number of closed adoptions, we just finished a study on this, is down to this many. That's an exact number right there. No, it's down to about 5% of new infant adoptions. And with the advent of the internet, all bets are off. Those of you who are thinking about adoption, think about forming relationships with the people in your children's lives. It's like an in-law model, right? You get married to somebody, you don't think they dropped out of the sky. They came with relatives. And in adoption today, that's more than likely what's going to be your option. That's not a bad thing. Our study says it's a good thing for almost everybody involved, but it can be a very difficult, complex thing to wrap your mind around. But it's an important one. So with that, the lay of the land is that it's changed, the adoption has changed radically. It's a different place, and hopefully we'll give you some sense of what that place looks like through the panelists today. Let me see what the next slide is just to make sure I'm not missing. No, back up. I'm going to end with that later. Okay, thanks. Okay, so our panelists are real experts in what they do for a living. And one of them is an expert by virtue of being what many of you are considering doing yourselves, becoming a parent through adoption. Me too, by the way, 2 of them. So I'll briefly introduce them, and then they will continue introducing themselves with some introductory remarks. If you want more information about their bios or about this conference or its programs, you go to Fertility Planit, which is very clever, huh? Planet, I get it. fertilityplanit.com, and you can get more information. But let's start first with Dr. Elias Lefferman, is the CEO of Vista del Mar, a terrific adoption agency located here in LA. I have a special little place in my heart for Vista because we adopted our daughter through Vista. So it's pretty good. Thank you. He will be followed by, well, this is not in the right order. These are different than these, but that's okay. By Dan Bucatinsky. Dan is an actor, a writer, a very good writer, by the way. His new book is wonderful. And his bio is available to you. He's on television. He's terrific. And David Radis is an adoption attorney extraordinaire. His reputation probably precedes him with many of you. So what I hope will happen here is that each of them will give their unique perspective. I'm going to out Dan as a gay adoptive dad. Oh my God! So he brings a couple of things to the table: the experience of being an adoptive parent, and in this brave new world of ours, a different kind of adoptive parent than used to be possible. And then you will learn about agency adoptions and lawyer adoptions. And with that, let's go in the order, I guess, that you're seated, please.
Would you like just an introduction?
You have, according to my crib sheet, you have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and some introductory remarks.
And then I can rebut, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And then David rebuts. There he goes.
And you all get to throw things.
I am still Elias Lefferman from the introduction. No. CEO at Vista. I did adoption specifically for about 15 years and working with one of the great attorneys in town, David Radis. We developed collaborative adoptions. I think one of the things that I feel good about in terms of the agency, Vista del Mar at least, and I'd encourage this with any agency or whatever you're looking for, is that we got rid of the barriers. At Vista, there was always a lot of restrictions. I think in the old days, people did home studies. Would they be approved? I think it's very scary for a family to come in. You want to start a family. You think there's going to be all these barriers to you. It's important to get rid of the barriers. And so one of the things I pride myself on is that get rid of the barriers. Let's open ourselves up. We're looking to find families for children, not just children for a family. I come from a child welfare position. And I want to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of each party. But we need to rule people in, not rule them out. We need to make adoptions accessible for kids by opening up to LGBT, to singles, to older people, to singles, to transracial. Let's get rid of the barriers so we can create easy access. Our goal as an agency is not to restrict or to look at your home study and say, are you good enough? You're all good enough. The question is, are you educated to this process? Do you have a guide to something that you didn't know about? Are you going to get the right answers that you need for your family so that you can make the best choice for yourself, so a birth parent can make the best choice for themselves, because ultimately it's the best choice for this child. So from an agency position, I believe our goal, our responsibility, is child welfare, to educate and facilitate to make the adoption process happen. Because we're interested in building families. Again, not just so you get a child, so a child gets a family.
Hear, hear.
Okay, great.
Here, here.
Is that the rebuttal?
I'm Dan, and I was fortunate enough to have both Vista del Mar and David Radis in my and my husband Don's lives when we wanted to become parents. And luckily for us, the combination was exactly what we needed to take us through this journey. And that's what it is. It is that for a straight couple, for a gay couple, for a single parent, whether you're going to have a child naturally, in vitro, adopt, use a surrogate, all of it is hard. All of it has labor pains. All of it is scary as hell. And all of it seems daunting. So no matter what, if you're going to become a parent, you're going to be scared shitless anyway. If you're going to go the route of adoption, which for us was the option that felt right for us, we had to do some looking at what were the real possibilities for a gay couple in the year that we decided to adopt. We went to Vista del Mar. We went to I guess it was a conference or a talk about international adoption, which is something that we wanted to do. And we realized how closed off most of the world is, if not all of the world,
all of it now.
To men who are a couple who want to adopt, without doing a fake Will and Grace, pretend your best girlfriend's your wife, and then bait and switch at the airport and at the, without getting people involved in lying, you had no option. We had no option internationally. Although, for many others, it is a wonderful way, because there are millions and millions of children out there who need homes. For Don and for me, we talked about surrogacy. Why wouldn't that be an option? And it could have been, but it just didn't feel right to him, and I was open to either. And the hardest thing to do during this process is to not judge yourself or not let others judge you. If you know what feels right, you have to do that thing. No one else is going to be taking that, wiping those noses and changing those diapers and raising those children. If you know you want a baby from birth, if you know that you want to adopt, thank God for open adoption. And so we were lucky enough at that point, between Vista Del Mar and meeting David Radis, to embark on what became the journey that was the way we became parents. We wanted to meet a birth mom. We wanted to write a birth mother letter. We wanted to learn about what that meant. How do we get matched with a birth mom? What happens when you meet a birth mom who isn't forthcoming? What happens when what happens when you miscarry? These things happen in natural childbirth, and they happen in adoption, but you want the people around you to support you through it so that you come out the other side, as we did. And I luckily was lucky, because I have my daughter, and then our birth mom got pregnant again and called us up, and like our lease was up, she was like, you guys 3 years later, you guys ready for another? And we were, and luckily enough, we wound up with our son from the same birth mom, and as it turns out, after some investigation, same birth father. Wow. We feel very fortunate, and I wrote a book about it, and I feel very strongly about inspiring others in the ways that I was also inspired to take this journey. So I also am very grateful to Vista Del Mar, and Cindy Lederer is here, who was a social worker who did our home study. It's about surrounding yourself with people who are going to help you push through the process. And there's no better at it, frankly.
Thank you.
And with that?
I'm Dave Radis, and I'm the attorney that works within the process of adoption. I've always believed that children choose their parents. It's not the other way around. So sometimes what you just need is somebody there helping you navigate the process. Adoption in the 70s really sort of changed. And this idea of a collaborative adoption where the agency's involved doing their social service role and the lawyer is involved doing the legal role, and it comes together like a puzzle piece fitting into the puzzle without having to jiggle it. And I liked that idea. So I was very fortunate to meet Vista Del Mar and Dr. Lefferman, and working out this idea that we could join forces and not really fight with each other, because we're not competing. There is no competition if children choose their parents. It really doesn't make any difference. It's just making sure that the families are set up and understand legally what they have to do. They have to also deal with the social service process, so they need some guidance with that. And then help in locating their birth mother, and help in educating them as to how to talk to them, how to put together materials to send to the birth parent. And then, as has been mentioned, adoption is like a river. It's still flowing. There's changes that are happening now left and right. And now I'm dealing with issues that of the internet and children that are finding their siblings and parents and so on. So it's a changing process of both a legal and a social service process. It's not one or the other. It's one process with different branches.
Okay, thank you. So the way we're going to go through this now is I'm going to ask a few questions. I'm going to point one at each of you. Feel free to rebut or add whatever others wish. And then after we do this little round, we will go and it'll be your turn, okay? So I wanted to ask Dan if he'd follow up on something. You said you and your husband had considered a surrogate, or considered, what was that process like? I mean, there are lots of people, gay, straight, male and female, who think about all these different options. What was the mindset? How did you get on the road to the conclusion that adoption is the way it's going to happen for us?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, most conversations between two spouses are based on misinformation and judgment and lack of communication. And, you know, like anything, we were both scared. We both had preconceived ideas about what it would mean to have a surrogate. I kind of liked the idea, like, oh, well, it would biologically, you know, it would feel more like ours if it was one of ours. And maybe we'll ask one of our sisters to be the donor of the egg. And very common, by the way, no judgment, great way to have a kid if that's the way you want to go. That completely creeped him out. And the surrogacy in general, like Don secretly was convinced that he's sterile, so it would definitely not be his sperm, it would be my sperm. And then how would me and the kids gang up on him? I mean, it was all, you know, crazy childhood immaturity stuff. However, it was real. He felt that. He felt like he would be going into it and feel outside of it and wouldn't feel, we're both men. We're two guys coming into it. A woman and a man automatically have weird and strange inegalities in there just based on their gender. One of them's gonna carry a baby naturally, and so those things are givens. With two guys, there are decisions to be made, and if one of you is gonna feel a little bit on the outside, and I was really open to the idea of adoption. There was a concept of adoption, the notion that babies, that there were women pregnant right this very second. A child is actually going to come into this world and not have a family. Already, like whether I'm cooking it up or someone else did, it's going to happen. And there's plenty who have already been born. That notion that like there's more of us and more of them that need us, it made me want to do it. And it was the choice he wanted more than at that time. And so I was like, great, that's the way we should go.
You know, it's interesting. I haven't thought about this in, I was going to say years, probably decades. But one of the truly fabulous things about adoption for my wife and me was that, and this is not a judgment, I think it's okay to have children biologically, okay? I'm all right with that. But one of the really fabulous things, we really shared parenting. It was a level playing field from day one. I got up at 2 in the morning and she alternated with her getting up at 2 in the morning. There was no biological component.
That's got nothing to do with adoption, because let me tell you something. I do everything. So if that were true, God,
yeah, but
damn,
if there were breastfeeding involved, there might be a different. But anyway,
I know.
But it was really that level playing field thing is a very interesting component of it, I think.
And I have to say one other thing. I didn't know open adoption was not that new, but it was new to us. We really wanted, and again, no judgment, this is just something that we knew we wanted. I wanted to be in the delivery room for the birth of my kids. I just wanted that. So to me, I thought surrogacy is the only way that that's going to happen. Well, we were in the delivery room for both of our kids. Open adoption, you're a partner with the couple or the birth mom, and that's an experience I will never, ever forget, and it will be with me forever. And by the way, if that's not something that is as important to someone, I mean, there's tons of babies that are already born that need homes. It was just something that we both wanted to experience.
And it doesn't, just for clarity, it doesn't always happen in open adoption.
Right.
Often it's after, but it very often does. I want to ask David next. You were talking about how it's changed, and people ask me a lot. We are really a think tank, not a placement agency at the Adoption Institute, but still the most common question is, how would you advise me to go about adoption? And the first thing I say is really what you're doing here is educate yourself. Educate yourself to the type of adoption, educate yourself so you understand how openness works, how in transracial adoption, you think you may want some education, maybe. So however you do it, that's the initial component. It's not a process question, it's a training question. It's understanding the world that you're going into. So with that, and it is a very rapidly changing world, David, what does the independent process look like today? How has it changed? What are you seeing? What are the big changes? And what do these folks have to know about what they see in front of their very eyes so that they can go through this process well?
Well, the biggest problem is the birth rates have been going down, not up. And The New York Times and Washington Post just recently had editorials on it indicating that the birth rates, independently, they did their study, came up with birth rate is as low as it has been since the 1920s. So the networking aspect of adoption now is different. It's going to take longer potentially. There are other aspects of things that we have to talk about in terms of unintended pregnancies. If the birth rates are down, you're going to encounter more potential situations with birth mothers who've exposed themselves to some substance that you wish the fetus hadn't been exposed to because it was unintended. There are aspects of openness that have changed from when openness in the early 70s was getting to know the family's name and a little biographical information to having them in the delivery room being the person who cuts the umbilical cord. And that's now the middle. That used to be the end of the envelope. Now the end of the envelope is ongoing relationships, not just with the birth parent, but the birth parent's family, and reunion questions, and things that you have to think about in terms of where the future is going to be. When 15 years ago, I didn't realize there was such a thing as a smartphone that people could get on the internet. I didn't even realize what the internet was 15 years ago. I don't know where it's going to be 15 years from today.
That's exactly right. And in terms of education, this is the challenge for the future. You do have to understand the world you're walking into. And anybody who thinks, well, we'll adopt a child and, you know, the wall will be built. The internet scales that wall.
Wait, and just for anybody who doesn't necessarily know about the nuts and bolts of actually how this all works, you know, David works to do outreach so that a birth mom has the tools by, let's say, opening the phone book and finding him with a toll-free number and say, I think I might want to place my child for adoption. And like a matchmaker, in a sense, finds also the families who are looking for and is able to then make choices so that they can possibly meet each other. But just in terms of nuts and bolts, that's really what you need in terms of bringing parties who don't necessarily know each other. And I can only imagine how the internet has made that more possible.
And what you can do today is you can do that by yourself. I'm not advising you to do that by yourself. It doesn't come with legal understanding or counseling understanding or therapy understanding or supports or services, but you can, and you can go to an attorney and you can go to an agency which typically has a broader range of services, and that's what I'm going to ask Elias about. What's the difference? You know, without any judgments, as Dan says, because I second that. What are the differences in how, if you go through an agency, if you do it independently, if you go through an attorney?
I think as people learn about independent adoptions and agency adoptions, one of the big things comes up, and what many adoptive parents worry about, is a mother coming back and the termination of parental rights. So I think, you know, for the last several years, one of the big things is, will we be safe? Can the mom come back and take the baby? And everybody's worried about that knock on the door that I've changed my mind. And so at one time, agencies were really used because we could do a relinquishment, termination of parental rights, versus consent, which is it takes more time. Today, the laws are changed, and I think that becomes less of an issue. But I think one of the big things now for me, as I mentioned before, is that the agency, we want to make sure that there's choice for everyone. And our goal is to, not a home study to see if you're any good, but in a home study to say, what is that you can tolerate? What do you want? Is it realistic? Let's expand your target or contract your target. Are the two of you or you sure, but what is that you want? And how do you find a place to ask those questions so that this adoption, which is lifelong, works best for you and your child and your extended family? Because it's going to impact everybody. I think with the attorneys, one of the strengths that David has that we've worked with is many women will call him. And they work very well. I'm going to just hold this thing. It works well for families as a person where women might call David. It doesn't happen that often with the agency. But what I'm finding out is you need to be so actively involved. You can't be passive about this process and just give it to your attorney or give it to your facilitator or give it to your agency. You need to develop a relationship where you are actively engaged in this process of identifying a situation that will work best for you. And I think a lot of what the agency does through the home study process or through the pathways to parenthood orientation is to help you focus in on What is it you're looking for in being a parent? What's different than what you thought walking in the door? How do you expand your target? Dave was saying that birth mom might have been on drugs. You might say, I want a birth mom who has all these qualities, and you're going to say, it's not going to happen. Are you open to a woman who's been using, methamphetamines and drinking? You say, no, we don't want that. You say, well, think about it. Why not? And I would say to people that I know a birth mom who is drinking, who is taking amphetamines, and smoking. They say, well, we don't want that. I said, well, you would have adopted me. Because at those days, pregnant women would drink or smoke. Whatever. So you have to broaden your perspective about it. And as an agency, that's what I want to do. Educate you to what you're getting into, but also reassure you. If you're committed to it, then it will happen for you. If you're in a partnership and one of you doesn't want it, there's high likelihood you won't do it, because there's a million reasons to say no in any situation. But how do you expand your thing from saying I want an infant to saying, well, a 2-year-old, 3-year-old, maybe some drugs, some alcohol. Let's be realistic about it. What can you tolerate? What can you do? So for me, it's education, child welfare, along with the legal piece of it.
There's also a great thing that Vista Del Mar did in terms of the collaboration between both, which was really important. Your attorney, David, for us, was our representative. He was our advocate, by definition. Who was our birth mom's advocate? She couldn't afford a lawyer. She didn't have a lawyer. She didn't have someone. And it's as scared as we were about the process. We had to chant this thing. It was hard. There's a lot of unknowns. Until the baby's born and until it's relinquished, there's things that can happen. She could change her mind. If she wants to have that child, you want her to make that decision. You don't look at that as an evil woman who changed her mind. If she wants to have that child, she should make that decision and do it before we've all gotten too far along. But you want her to feel the support she has, and you also just want to get your baby, and you want her to feel as much support as she can. So Vista Del Mar was also providing the kind of counselors and the kind of counseling for the birth mom during the process that enabled her fears to be assuaged, that enabled all of us to talk about what a contact agreement meant, what that would mean, how would we negotiate that, what are the things that you're scared about, are you having second thoughts? Don't be scared, if you're scared to ask that question, the question is not going to go away. It's happening to her anyway.
Right?
Yeah. Sorry.
Some adoptive families don't want us counseling. They say, well, you'll talk her out of it. Let me just say that I think it's important that as an agency we give her options, because I'm committed to provide options. And if one of those options look good to her at the beginning, then you're not in for a lot of money and a lot of emotional pain. Better you should know in the beginning if she's going to change her mind. Because if she doesn't know about her options and alternatives, or her grandma or her mother don't know that she's pregnant, in the hospital, grandma is going to show up. The more you know ahead of time, the safer it is. Now, you're never safe in terms of can she change her mind? That can always happen. And you must go in knowing that. But by counseling ahead of time, you know what the red flags are and can make informed choices as best you can. But that's why I think counseling is so important. Because if she's going to change her mind, know at the beginning, not at the end.
And even if a way of thinking about this has to be one of the biggest fears. I was there, been there, done that. This has to be one of the biggest fears for pre-adoptive parents, right? What if she changes her mind and decides to parent her child? I write about this as the adoptive, and we never learn how to think about that. I suggest we think about it as the adoptive version of miscarriage. It happens. The difference between ours and miscarriage in the biological world is that in the adoptive version, the child is alive and well and being parented by someone who loves her. Worse things have happened. But it is hard for us to get our heads around that.
You get back on the horse, though. It's not the universe telling you not to adopt. If you miscarry, you try to have a baby again. And, our straight couple friends who are doing it naturally do it that way. And I'd love to know from David, because we had a stumble step or two, and it must be absolutely just, you're not fazed by it. You probably know what the warning signs are, and you're probably not fazed by it.
It's like a surgeon, you are fazed by it, you just don't let your client realize it.
Okay. You were fazed?
When you sleep next to a cell phone that goes off in the middle of the night and you answer the phone, you're fazed by it. It affects you. It affects all the professionals. We're all the same in the sense that when we're cut, we bleed. and we bleed red, even though I'm a lawyer. It's not ice cold. It's warm-blooded. So, you know, the problem in understanding the loss is that I've always viewed it, again, I go back to my mantra that children choose their parents. It's hard to explain to a family that has lost or had a miscarriage in the adoption that, well, it wasn't really meant to be. You know, it's not your child. We're going to find your child, and ultimately, we do. And that's the key, is to just keep positive and keep moving forward, understand the risks, and in each individual scenario, understand. I don't like to refer to people as birth mother because they have a name. And my pet name for birth mothers is Nancy. And I tell my clients, we call her Nancy because Nancy can be spelled more than one way. And make sure you know how to spell her name. Don't misspell it. Treat her with respect. Treat her as a human being. Treat her as to who she is. If you do that, she'll treat you equally with respect. And that's the key. As Dr. Lefferman pointed out, you know, we're not taking her baby. She's placing her child. If it's the right decision for her. And if it's the right decision for you, you're going to receive the child that's your child, and you're going to raise your child. Yes, you're going to hold your breath for periods of time. I get that. I understand that. It's unfortunate that there can be loss in every aspect of the adoption. There's loss for the birth mother, even if she places the child. She has to grieve the loss. There's loss for the adopting parents in the sense that you lose your ability to, in essence, procreate a child that is biologically yours. But there's the gain in raising a child that is your child. And the child has a family that loves it and is raising it. They have gain, but they lose too. They lose later on in not having had the relationship with their biological roots, which is now changing, of course. And so that's the whole new bold future.
And that is the bold future. I'm going to jump right up. We've taken a lot of time. I'm going to skip over some questions and turn this next chapter over to you guys. The one thing I'm just going to, an overlay, if I can bring together some of what you're hearing here, there are complexities in adoption. And again, the concerns that people have, oh my God, you know, there are complexities, whether it's a transracial or whether you have relationship with birth parents or the kid was older. So I want to assure you that adoption is the only complex form of families. Divorce families are simple. Step families are like this, a snap. Single parent families, hey, it's a day at the beach, right? Families are complicated.
Can I say one thing?
Of course, families are complicated as you think about whether you, and I'm not telling you what to do, when you think about what you're going to do, put it in that context rather than the fears, the concerns. They're all legit. Educate yourself and you learn how to deal with them. Go on.
As we talk about adoption, there's a guy named David Kirk who wrote a great book called Shared Fate. And I think it really impacts all the adoptions I've seen, which is your ability to accept differences versus rejecting differences. Because when you adopt, there's going to be a different personality in your home. And when things go wrong, it's really easy to blame something, you know, to have a hook to hang the blame on. If your adopted child doesn't do well in school, the teacher might say, well, they're adopted. When bad things happen, they'll say something like the adopted child. Adoption is used as a label. Your child may come into your home and be a mathematician, and you're a musician. You'll say, this child's so different. And a lot of people have to understand, this child enriches your family. And how well you accept or reject the differences this child and his family brings to you is very important for that child to feel they are part of your family as opposed to different than your family. And we see, I was working with many teens in residential treatment who were adopted. And there was a point in time where they felt that their parents felt they were different than them. And so I just say this to you because I think it's such an important part of adoption to understand this concept of acceptance of the differences versus rejection of those differences.
Well, I'm a research wonk, so I will tell you that what the research shows is that the success rate of adoptive families, it's probably true of biological families, the success rate, the biggest factor in success rate is parental expectations. If you adopt your child and think, well, she's going to Harvard or all bets are off, you may not get what you wanted, and you may blame adoption for it. So to underscore what Elias said, so you accept the child for who she or he is. It's what you do when you give birth. And we can do it in this realm as well. Okay, we're going to take a few questions. Anyone who has a question, please raise your hand. We're going to get a mic to you because this is being broadcast and we want to be able to hear what everyone has to say. First one right here.
Yes, hi, my name is Heather. Thank you for being here. Can you sort of start from the beginning for those of us who are considering adoption? Because I kind of felt like you started in the middle. So if we're thinking about adoption, do we retain the attorney and the agency, or do we retain one and the other comes as sort of a part of the package? What is the process like once you've started adoption? What are the costs involved, both attorney's fees and any fees with the agency?
I'm an attorney, so I don't
believe.
There are no adopting from foster care, there are no costs. And now we'll move on from there.
Well, I'll take it from the legal point and then I'll pass it on. I recommend that you start meeting with an attorney. Obviously, I think that it's important to understand legally what you're doing first. Then I think it's imperative to take classes and attend social service-related orientation programs, such as the agencies here in Los Angeles do, Vista, the IAC, and Kinship, the three major agencies that I think have classes. You need to have a concurrent path. You have to understand first the sea, if you're going to sail the seas of legal controversy, you have to know the flags under which you sail. That's understanding the currents and the laws and everything else, the trends in adoption. Then you need to understand the social service aspects. And that's the benefit of doing a collaborative adoption, which again is something that I strongly encourage all my clients to consider. And it's not, from a cost perspective, it's no more expensive than doing an independent adoption. But to answer your question, there are two forms of adoption in California. There's something called independent, which means independent of a licensed agency. It means that you're working through the county, the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services or the State Department of Social Services. You're still going to need a home study. You're still going to need a post-placement study. You're still going to need to have the mother's rights dealt with through social service, because California is a social service-oriented system, which means that the mother must interact with either a social worker from an agency or what's called an adoption service provider, which is a social worker in the independent arena. There are costs for all of this. We call that the bureaucratic cost. Then there's the legal cost. That's the fees that you would pay an attorney such as myself or an attorney to represent the birth mother or both. Then there is possible necessities of life. California is a state that allows you to financially assist the birth mother through her necessities during the period of disability. Then there is the medical expenses, if not covered by insurance or state aid. In an interstate practice, which is the way most adoptions are done in the United States today, there's transportation expenses, because you may locate a birth mother that's in California, but it still may cost some transportation to bring her into Los Angeles or for you to go to her. If you locate her in New Hampshire, it's going to be more expensive. So you have to calculate all those things. And then, as I said, then there's the post-placement study. That's studying the development of the child in your home. That's done either by the private agency, again, or by the county agency does the post-placement study. Now, there's an expense for that. And in the end, you then go to court and finalize your adoption. There's an expense to the court system. And in the end, when you pay all of this and look at the total cost, private adoption, which is what we're really talking about, whether it's with an agency or a lawyer, it's private adoption, has an expense component. And it can be budgeted for everybody's individual budget. I'm sorry?
Ballpark.
Tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, ballpark at $25,000 on the low end to perhaps $50,000 on the high end, including everything, but not everything is included in every single adoption, please. Please understand, it's like a component. If she needs medical care, you have to pay for that, but if she doesn't, if it's covered by state aid, then that portion of it comes out.
And there's more than one way to do this. And I think to answer the question, like, what's the first step, is make some kind of a phone call to somebody. If it's the, because if you were to engage a lawyer, the lawyer would then say, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is your next step. I want you to do this. You're going to, and in terms of that, right? I mean, you really took us through it. We did have to go to Vista del Mar. We did take a class. But we also knew we had to put together a birth mother letter. We had to talk about how we were going to lay out on paper or on the internet the way in which we describe ourselves as a potential family and elicit response from someone out in that world who might want to choose us as parents. That's like a very early step. So it sounds completely daunting, but just the first step is to make a decision about the kind of adoption you're thinking of and make a few calls to inquire, like, do we want to go this route? Do we want to foster adopt? Do we want to do a private adoption and see if we can afford that? All those things are options, but you have to explore them and make a call and start exploring them. It doesn't mean you can't back out. It doesn't mean you can't change your mind. It doesn't mean you can't pick a different route, but...
And I will add just one thing. The internet is your friend. You can do some research. You can educate yourself before making that call. And I would add, don't assume that the first person you meet is your best friend. You may love the first agency or the first attorney. You may not. This is a person who will change your life. You want a comfort level. You want to feel like, as though they are giving you what you need in terms of education, in terms of support, whatever it is. But it should be something that you are comfortable with.
Can I add one other
yeah,
thing?
of course.
It's sequential, which is, I think, what Dan was actually getting, what he said. But you need to understand that adoption is sequential. If you look at the whole picture in life, you're healthy, except in adoption. Adoption is paint by number. Don't look at the whole picture until you understand what the number was before and what the number is that you're going to face next. Right now is all you have. If right now you're on number 3, understand number 3 thoroughly before you move on to number 4.
Okay.
If I can. Yeah, I appreciate you beginning with the attorney.
This is going to be the last comment on this question, so we can get to some more.
I'd say you can begin with an attorney. You can also begin with an agency.
Absolutely.
If there's an orientation, not just about what that agency does, but what your options are. Because the first steps is, well, what's right for me? So at the orientation, do they talk about an agency adoption? Do they talk about use of facilitators, the use of attorneys, domestic, international, special needs? It sounds confusing, but it's more information for you. Then it could be that a collaborative is the best option. Some of you may say, well, can I just do it with the agency? Yeah. But that comes from educating yourself and finding your comfort level with the different options. And so there's that beginning, whether you start with David, who gives a very good overview, or with Vista or the other agencies. Are they answering your questions? If they're not, go somewhere else. So you have those
I like that word orientation, whoever you go to. Understand what the landscape is in front of you. You're going to make an important decision with that information. Next, back there.
Can any of you speak about the changing landscape of international adoption and if there are any emerging pockets of hopefulness?
Well, I'll do this one. We're doing a study on international adoption right now. The nutshell answer is, it depends on what your definition of hopefulness is. The numbers are dropping pretty dramatically. There are roughly a third as many adoptions occurring from overseas today as there were just half a dozen years ago. And we don't see the bottom in sight. Now, that said, lots of people adopt internationally. Almost 10,000 last year. That's not what it used to be, but it's not 8. And there are countries, international adoption has always been like this. In times of crisis, Ethiopia suddenly surged as a country from which people are adopting. And that surged for a few years, now it's leveling off. And there will be another one. Vietnam closed, it's about to reopen, at least for some adoptions. So if that's the route you want to take, again, the orientation, educate yourself. There might be a country that I learned today that there's some reasonable numbers from the Philippines, which I wasn't on my, through Vista. So if it's one of the routes that you're interested in, absolutely. I urge people to still consider it. And to the question of, well, why are people going abroad rather than adopting right here at home, I'll ask that question of the woman who's just having her 5th child. There are kids right here who need you. So I don't engage in that sort of question. It pits kids against each other. They all need homes. And however you choose to do it is the right way. Wait, one sec, wait for the mic, or
We could restate it.
or our audience won't. They asked to. Anyway.
How open is international adoption to single parents?
If you, I can answer this, but if anybody else wants to weigh in, feel free.
If you're gay, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Right. Some countries just really don't want it, and there are age requirements then that are going to be different for you. Depends on what you're looking for. There are countries that are available to singles, but you may be adopting a child that's a little bit older than you want, or has some other special needs. Outside of the United States, I believe that singles are not frowned upon, but they're not smiled upon either, whereas in the United States, you're on an equal footing.
Yeah. The bottom line in almost every country is that you would be adopting an older child or one with special needs, but it is possible in some countries. And again, and they change. So it's worth going to an agency or to whomever and finding out. Another question?
So we have some questions from our live stream
terrific.
audience.
Okay.
Actually, quite a few. In fact, Dan Bucatinsky, you are trending for us.
Okay, if I may, let's keep the answers very short because we're going to have to wrap up in just 8 minutes and 50 seconds.
All right. So you talked initially about looking inside your family for children that may need homes, need families that are intact. The question that we are getting is, what are the legal needs and fees? Is it messier because you're related, potentially?
That's for me.
No, that was a separate thing. You're trending overall. People are very excited you're here.
I'm glad. I got
So that was a compliment.
I got
So
panicked. Oh,
setting
thank
that
you.
aside. Thank
Happy
you
to
for
hear
helping
it.
us raise awareness about this. But I think probably, Adam, you can address this. Or
Would you
send it-
restate the question?
Sure.
cost?
So you said intra-family adoption is a way to look inside your own family at children that may need to be adopted. A lot of people picked up on that initially. What are the legal needs around that? Is it messier because you're related?
Yeah, well, it generally is referred to in the United States as family fostering adoption. Many of them are not actually legally finalized as an adoption. Those that are would have to pay minimal expenses in terms of the legal fees in doing the process, the filing fees. Sometimes there's a home study. In most states, there will be a home study fee. And most counties have a fee that they will reduce many times for families. But most foster adopt in the United States, now I don't have the exact percentages, but I've always assumed that most of them are done within the family environment, and it's sort of legally loose. By that I mean there's not necessarily an adoption court order.
No. The informal adoption is, there are about 130,000 adoptions in the U.S. a year of all sorts from other countries. About over 50,000 of those are foster care. About 40% of the total is step-parent adoptions. And so we're talking about all the rest. That 50-some thousand is formal adoptions through the courts. They are often kinship adoptions. They are most often by the foster parents. So that is a real route for continuing to give a child care. You know, the old adage, you don't want a kid bouncing from home to home. And this is the solution that the system has come up with. So you go from foster to adopt.
So one other question, this might be for Dan, which is, how do you as a couple ensure you're on the same page? Not everyone is honest with themselves.
Yeah, I throw that right back at them. No. Listen, every couple is different and every marriage is different. Talking openly and honestly, judgment-free about what you really are comfortable with and what you're not is the most important thing. When you guys are sitting in that room, you're going to be the ones wiping the noses and taking them to school and, God willing, raising these children until they're adults. You want to be honest, and any fears you have, now's the time. We talked a lot about that. You're going to be asked a lot by an agency or by a lawyer. Are you open to a special needs child? You're going to feel like, I want to be the kind of person that says yes to that. Yes. And you may not be. So say no. It's okay. You're just sitting there in private.
Absolutely.
You're a white couple. Are you open to a multiracial child? Politically, you want to say yes, but you just don't feel right about it. Don and I are two men. There was enough of a challenge raising a child that's going to be raised by two guys that we thought maybe we shouldn't add to that, because Don, who has a brother who adopted biracially, and there were other challenges involved in that. And we imagined what would that be like if on top of that their parents had been gay. So we thought about, like, we're two white gay men and this is what we're comfortable with. This is what we can do to be parents. Should we take ourselves out of it because we're judging ourselves because we kind of do want a baby from birth, and we kind of do want a baby that might look like us because we're already two guys and there's no woman in our family model? We had admitted to ourselves that probably would be our first choice. Were we open to it? Yes, but that was a decision. And if you're not open to it, you want only a girl, you have to just say that. It's going to limit your options, but being completely honest about what page you're on is crucial, because you don't want that shit to come out later on.
And remember, the decision will only last forever.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right? Pretty important. One last question right up here. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that you had a mic. Please.
You were talking about advocates before, so I'm actually in the midst of the process through the county and going through it now. Already did like the licensing from the state and all this other stuff. But I'm getting to a point where I'm feeling like I don't have an advocate for myself in the process per se. I feel like social worker is advocate for child, which makes sense. Is it too late to get something like that, or do you have to like really? It was kind of a choice I should have made a while ago, going through an agency, dealing with an attorney versus the county. I just feel like there's something kind of missing in this my relationship with the social worker. I feel like I want an ally on my side to a certain extent. And I don't know if it's too late for that.
Never too late.
Never too late.
I mean, it's a simple answer. It's never too late.
Do I continue down this path, or do I have to go like kind of back all these steps and kind of go down this path through an agency?
You can continue. You can continue down your path. You're just going to get advice. I mean, using the term advocate, you'll get advice if that's what you're looking for as the steps go. If you meet with somebody who can direct you initially as to what you may need, whether that's an agency or a social worker individually or a lawyer, you meet with somebody who will help you understand what your next step is.
If anybody, we're going to have to wrap it up. We're supposed to be on time here. If anybody has any other questions, I'm sure, I'm speaking for all of us, that if you want to come up, we're happy to answer them, okay, individually. This is the time I'm supposed to thank everybody. So I want to start by, it's not the right order, but I want to thank all of you for showing up here, for asking such good questions, for caring enough to be here. For understanding that education, that's why you're here, right, is a critical part of the picture. And on behalf of all of us, we wish you enormous luck, whatever you decide.
Thank you.
So now the laundry list, okay? Thank you for everyone who's watching and tweeting and Facebooking. It is a wonderful, amazing new world. Feel free, the people here or online, to share your views, and you can continue this conversation, ask questions on Twitter or Facebook with hashtag fertility and hashtag F like Frank, P like Peter, S like Sam, 13, Fertility Planit. You get it? FPS 13. You can watch all the proceedings that happened here today, even if you miss sessions, on fertilityplanit.com for free all weekend, and then on demand starting Monday, January 14th. Thank you to Upstream for recording all the programs. Thank you all for a really wonderful session. Really great job, and your insights are wonderful. Thank you to the sponsor of this session, the Independent Adoption Center, and for the people who put all of this together, a really superb job.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And I have 44 seconds to say, you are all welcome to join a collaborative art installation, which is out there. You can all participate. We all, don't ask me what it means, but we all participate and we all contribute to this art installation. And it's going to be displayed here starting tomorrow and we can all be a part of it. So thank you all so much for coming today.
Thank you.
Again, if you have any questions,
Yeah, we're here.
please feel free to throw them at us.
Yeah, you can also follow, if you send on Twitter, if you're following Dan Bucatinsky on Twitter, I will answer any questions about my adoption, about scandal, about any...
And Dan's and my books are available for sale out there.
Yeah, I'll be...
We will sign them.
Also, we should remind the audience here that are very interested.
Right across.
Dan is on another, he's part of the celebrity conversation this afternoon with Shonda Rhimes and Dan Savage. So you might want to check that out as well. We welcome you.